All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Edible Software. Today, what we're going to be talking about specifically under the receivables menu is Payment Refund Center. So, collecting payments and processing payments from customers, as well as applying credits. And of course, everything that entails overpayments, underpayments, anything like that. So, just to start off, just to get some preliminaries out of the way, we're going to talk about when we talk about setting up batches in the system, we are going to need a few things set up beforehand. Of course, code maintenance is its own training, so we'll be revisiting some of this stuff a little bit later. But the things you'll need set up under code maintenance, of course, are your bank accounts that you are going to be depositing into. You will need your payment instruments set up that are tied to those bank accounts. So any cash, checks, any credit card instruments that you want to set up, those will need to be set up beforehand. And once those are set up, they'll need to be added to these two screens right here. So a lot of this information should already be set up ahead of time. However, if you ever needed to add a new bank account or anything like that, these are some of the steps that you'll have to go through. So once the payment instrument is set up and linked to the bank account in your code maintenance, you'll come to this first company default payment distribution template screen. And this is where we're basically adding or activating that payment instrument for the entire database. So here is basically we're just making sure that it's added. So here I can see all of my green, it's included. And I've got two bank accounts that I'm working with, my Bank of America and my Chase checking. All right. And once it's added in the company default payment distribution template, then we can go a little bit further and create different batch templates. Now, this may not be needed for all of you. This might just be for certain number of you that have cashiers that only accept certain payment instruments for certain customers. But you'll come to that AR batch distribution template screen. You'll set up a batch and you'll mark one as default if you have multiple. So you will need one at least set up as a default. So you may only have one here, and that's perfectly okay. So right now, I only have this Bank of America template set up. I have not set up my Chase checking. So here, if I'm going to go ahead and set up a template for my Chase checking, I can go ahead and click Edit, or I apologize, click New, enter in the name, and then add those payment instruments to that template. So a payment instrument can belong into multiple templates if you wanted it to. Perfectly fine. The only thing is that you cannot have multiple cash payment instruments within two templates or within a single template. So here I'm going to go ahead and just add my Chase. So in this case, just for this example, I'm separating my templates based on the bank account. Now, of course, that doesn't need to be the case. You can have one template if you have two deposit accounts. You can have a template with both accounts in there. That's perfectly okay. This is just the example that I'm going for. So anyway, so now I have all of my payment instruments tied to at least one distribution template, so I'm good to go. All right, so now I'm ready to go into my Payment Refund Center and start setting up my batch. So under Receivables and Payment Refund Center, so I've got a couple here set up already. So these are just test batches that I was working with. In order to collect payments, you will need to create a batch ahead of time. So you can create it same day. You can be diligent and set up your batches for the week. And then setting up your batches, you can set up as many for the same day, even for the same template as you want to. So there's really no restrictions as far as how many you can set up. It's really there just so you can keep track of your payments however you need to. Some of our clients will create batches for different payment instruments. They want to keep all of their credit cards within the same batch versus their cash. We do have reports that show the distribution in the batch, so that's not completely necessary. But again, that's up to you how you want it to show in the system. Some will also base it on cashiers. If you have different cashiers selecting different or setting up different payments, you can set up a batch per cashier. So again, that's completely up to you. I'm just going to create one batch for today. So the first step is click New on the right side. And here I'm going to select what are the elements of this batch. So first things first, what bank account or what template am I using? So of course it defaults with your default template, but I can choose the Chase checking if I need to. I'm going to put in a batch number. The batch number can be whatever you want it to be. Some people will use the current date, and then maybe if they're doing this per if they're doing this per payment instrument or anything like that, we can shorten that and just say credit card, something like that, or cash or check, whatever the case may be. Or again, they could just have the one batch as a catch-all. The apply date is very important. One, it is going to control which invoices you can actually take payments for. In a not so common example, let's say if you had payments from Friday that you didn't enter into the system that you need to catch up on, you can backdate this apply date as needed. However, if you have invoices that were created for today and billed, then you won't be able to see you'll be able to see those invoices, but you won't be able to apply payments to them. So the apply date has to be as of or later than the requested delivery date of the invoice. And again, that's per the requested delivery date of the invoice, not the ship date. So that's one thing it controls. It controls which invoices you have the ability to apply payments towards. It also controls when the payment actually applies to the general ledger in your for your bank account. So this apply date, there's a separate deposit option or separate deposit step involved in here, but that is just feeding into the edible bank reconciliation report. It doesn't affect your general ledger. This apply date is what affects your general ledger, so just bear that in mind. The description can be whatever you want, so you can choose to fill in or not fill in. As you can see up here, I didn't put in a description for some of these, so I'm just going to go ahead and say test batch. And then the cashier and the float really are only for those who are using who want to separate for cashier, and float is essentially what you have in the till or what you have in your till at the time. So that is basically just telling you, keeping track of what you had before and what you have after. Then the last part is these control totals. So these are completely optional, but they are useful for those of you who want to go ahead and count ahead of time and have those totals there. So as you are processing in the system, you have the ability to compare fairly easily what was entered in versus what was counted ahead of time. So here I just put in my number of transactions. I can put in the amount that I collected in cash, the amount I collected in checks, and the amount I collected in other, which of course would be wire transfers or credit cards, so on and so forth. So I have the ability to put in those amounts, and as I am actually processing, this right side is going to be populating with what I enter in. So at the end, I will either be in balance or out of balance based on my control totals. Now, you don't have to be in balance in order to deposit, which we'll get to in just a bit, because I'm not going to enter in any control totals for today, but it will indicate whether you are out of balance or not. So anyway, that is pretty much that. Really, all you absolutely need is the template selected, the batch number, and the apply date, and you're ready to save. Okay, so that is setting up the batch. And so now what we're going to do is go ahead and come to batch details for that batch with that batch selected. I'm going to come to batch details, and I'm going to go ahead and start processing my payments. We will be coming back into this batch screen and talking about some of these other features later on. But right now, I want to go ahead and get into this batch and start collecting my payments. So when you come into the batch details screen, it's showing you essentially what is in this batch currently. Of course, since right now we haven't processed anything, nothing is showing. So what we're going to do is come down here and click Payment Refund Center, this button at the top. And that's going to take me into my payment processing screen. So here I'm actually going to expand this so that we get a better look at it. So to start off with, I can either do two things. I can find a customer or find an invoice. Whichever one you go with, it's going to return the same information. If I find a customer, it's going to return all of my billed invoices with a balance for that customer. But the same thing with the invoice. If I find a specific invoice for the customer, let's say this Dole produce, it's going to return not just this invoice, but this invoice as well. So whatever you decide to go with, that's completely up to you. Of course, find invoice is easier for me for testing. Most will go ahead and look for the customer. Now, if you have a corporate and you wanted to look up all of the customers underneath that corporate, then you do have this option to display all customers. So what that's going to do is it's going to show every customer location underneath that corporate. So right now we just have the one customer ID for Dole Produce. But if I had a number 2 or a number 3 customer location, it would show all of those underneath. So those of you who work with Walmart and Kroger, and they may pay or they may send checks that apply to multiple customer locations, this is a good option for that. All right. So once I have the customer selected and I see my invoices, now I can go ahead and click New Payment. Now another feature, just to show you, is this From and To date. So this From and To date actually allows us to filter by date as well. So if I know I'm looking for a specific invoice on a specific day, I can go ahead and change this From and To date before clicking New Payment, and that will filter my invoices by that date. So just another filter option if you needed it. All right. So after clicking New Payment, I have a payment ID that is generated by Edible Software. If you are collecting a check from a customer, it is recommended that you go ahead and put the check number there. You do have to put the check number in a different area as well. However, this is the first thing is that we see in the customer ledger and in reports as well. So it might be a little bit easier to recognize that payment if the check number is there. So again, completely up to you. That's just an option that you have. And then the full amount of the payment. So they are paying off, let's say, this invoice right here, and just this invoice. So 96.80. So I'm collecting 96.80. I go ahead and select, after I enter in my amount, now I have to distribute to what payment instrument I'm using. So I click this Payment Refund Distribution button, and here I have all of my options. I have my credit card, my wire, and my cash. So since this is a credit card, I'm going to go ahead and put in that same amount. And this reference number field is really only for check payment instruments. If I was selecting a check payment instrument, then I would be entering the check number in this field. So that's what I was talking about earlier. If you didn't want to put in the check number and the payment ID, you have the ability to skip that and just put it in here. But here, if you are using a check, it is required. But of course, for any other payment instruments, you don't have to. So I'm going to go ahead and click Return to Payment screen once I have distributed. And now, if this is simply a situation where it's a check to an invoice or invoices, I'm just going to select the invoice or invoices that this check or amount is being applied to. So if I had a full amount being applied to multiple checks, I would just check off all of the different invoices and credits that I wanted to apply. And once I'm done, I click apply to selected. You'll see whatever is selected is going to highlight in blue. It will show the apply amount in the apply field, and it will show the balance after that, after this is applied. So if everything looks good, I don't have a balance remaining, and I don't expect a balance remaining, then I can go ahead and click save. So kind of a long-winded example of perfect of a perfect payment sequence. It matched up completely. Um, of course, not everything is perfect. Sometimes they underpay and overpay. But just to go through that really quickly again, since I know it was a little long-winded, I'm going to go through that same example really quickly and show you uh, everything without so many words. So I select my customer. I click New Payment. I can put in a payment ID if I want to or skip it. I put in the amount that I need. I need to distribute this payment. So if I'm choosing check, then I do require a check number. Then I'm going to click Return to Payment screen. Select the invoice or invoices that I need to pay off. Apply to selected. Make sure that everything looks good. Everything is highlighted in blue. My balance is correct. And I click Save, and that's it. So that again is an example of a perfect situation. Now, of course, like I said, not everything is perfect. So let's talk about underpayments or short payments. So I'm going to find a customer again, and let's say they paid in cash, but they only paid me $90. So in this case, I've got two options that I can work with. Same steps. I'm going to click New Payment. I'm going to enter in the amount that they gave me. So they gave me $90 in total. I'm going to choose Payment Refund Distribution. Now you can distribute this if you wanted to, or if this is a cash payment, you can simply write in cash at the top. That will choose your cash payment for you. So if you wanted to, you could simply write in cash. You don't have to go to the payment refund distribution. Anything beyond cash, you will need to go to that screen. But here, if I wanted to leave the balance open, so they're paying me $90, they owe me $95. If I wanted to leave that $5 on their ledger and expect that to be paid later on, then I would follow the same steps as before. I would select, apply to selected, and save. That would leave that $5. That would leave that $5 sitting there. However, if I wanted to completely write off this invoice, I'm not going to quibble over $5. They didn't have it. It's okay. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to manually write in the $90 for the apply amount. That actually enables this adjustment amount field. So I can write off the $5. So as long as I have the apply amount and the adjustment amount, it'll show me my balance as of when this is saved. But I need to specify where that $5 is going. So I need to say where this is, what I'm writing this off to. Under code maintenance, and I apologize, I did somewhat skip that, but under code maintenance, there is also an area for payment adjustment reasons. So for overpayments and underpayment and short payments, these are basically reasons that you would use pointed to a specific GL account. So it might be bad debt, it might be something else, but these reasons are preset for you so that you can just say, this is a customer short payment, and that $5 will be written off to that GL account it is assigned to. So I'm going to click Save, and that's it. So now that invoice was fully written off, no balance is remaining, and I'm good to go. Now, there is the other situation. There are overpayments. So I'm going to find this customer again, or I'm going to find this customer. I'm going to click New Payment. So same steps. But let's say they went ahead and paid us $150 and they paid it to us in a check. Maybe they miswrote it. Maybe they meant to, but they just said, you know what? Keep the $50 on our account and apply it to something else later on. So we're basically creating an open receipt with this. We're basically creating an open receipt with this $30. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the same steps I did for the original payments that I made. After I have the amount distributed, I'm going to hit select, apply to selected, and I'm going to go ahead and click save. So this message will pop up asking me, do I want to save this as an open receipt? And of course, I can enter in a note describing what this open receipt is for or anything like that. But once I'm done, I go ahead and click yes. And so now that invoice has been paid off, and I have a $30 credit balance or a $30 open receipt on the customer's ledger. So that is those are the main or primary ways of applying payments in the system. Now, of course, there are other ways to apply overpayments and everything like that, which we're actually going to get to in just a sec. But I've run out of invoices to work with, so let me jump ahead really quickly and talk about something else. So as you can see, I've been processing these payments. They've been feeding into this batch. They feed into my right end over here. So now I can choose to continue on and deposit this or do whatever I need to. I can still work in this batch. As long as it's not deposited, I can come back in here, come to batch details, and do what I need to. Now let's say I have this 9680 and I forgot they actually overpaid me. They paid me with a $100 bill. And so I actually need to redo this amount. So in the case of it was an incorrect payment or something like that, or if it was an incorrect customer, then you would want to go ahead and just reverse that. So we have two options here. One, I'm going to tell you we don't recommend at all. This return option, do not press at all. Do not, do not, do not. I feel like saying it again. Do not press return. It was there for older purposes, but we have found it doesn't work as well, and we have other ways of working with NSF fees and things like that. So completely ignore return. What we want to look at right now is reverse. Reverse is simply an undo. It allows us to return the balance to the customer. It returns the invoice to an unpaid status. Basically, it just undoes what we did. So I'm going to go ahead and click reverse with that payment selected. And it's going to tell me this is essentially going to undo whatever I did. And that includes any debit memos that were created, any cash receipts, any open receipts. So if I had chosen the second or the last option, that 150, where we had the $30 open receipt, it would actually undo that open receipt as well. Of course, it would have to. So this is just a message telling you that this operation is going to completely reverse what we did. So I'm going to click yes. So it shows in red. It still shows in the batch, but you can see the reversed amount over here. So of course, our total has changed down at the bottom. So this is there just for historical and review purposes, but it actually has no balance in the batch itself. So if I come back to the Payment Refund Center, and I go to find that customer invoice, here I can find it once again. All right. So again, in the situation where we need to undo a payment or reverse a payment, you always have the ability to click reverse as long as the batch is not deposited yet. But never, ever, ever click return. So now let's go ahead and go back to where we were at, and we're going to talk about creating an overpayment. So what we did earlier was technically an overpayment. It saved it as an open receipt. But let's say they overpaid you with 20 cents. So if they overpaid you with 20 cents, they said, you know what, just keep the change. I just need to go. So of course, in that case, it will be nice to go ahead and apply that 20 cents somewhere for our extra income. So here, what we're going to do is after we've selected the customer or selected the invoice, same steps, click new payment, put in the amount that they gave us. So they gave us 97 in all. Select however they paid us. So again, I don't have to enter in cash here. I could just enter in cash as the payment ID, but whichever way works. And just like writing off a short payment, I'm not going to select and apply to selected. What I want to do is actually write in the apply amount, 97. And as you can see, that is actually going to give me my overpaid amount. So it's still going to save it as an open receipt, but it is going to flag it as an overpayment that I can apply later on in the apply overpayment screen. So I'm going to go ahead and click save. So now I have that 20-cent open receipt. So I can apply this as an open receipt if I want to, or I can do it through the apply overpayment screen, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. All right. So those are some of the primary features as far as processing payments. We also have a few others in here, such as processing refunds and processing applying credits and things like that. So what I'm actually going to do really quickly is I'm going to create a credit memo. I'm going to create a sales order. I'm going to ship and bill it, and I'm going to create a credit memo and show you how to apply credits through the Payment Refund Center. So give me just a sec, and I'll be as quick as possible. So here, for many of you who are working in AR, this process will already be done for you, so you don't have to worry about this. Okay. And then ship and bill this. Oops. So right now what I'm doing, just so we're not sitting in silence, I've created a sales order. I'm marking it billed. And then I'm creating a credit memo that I can apply to later on. So credit memos we've already talked about as well. This is a separate training, but I'm creating an open credit memo that I can apply to this invoice later on. Okay, so quantity, let's say 10. This is a price adjustment, and I'm taking $1 off each. So click save. Okay, so I've got a $10 credit against a $50 invoice. These are not numbers these are numbers that I'm sure many of you are not used to working with. They are very small, but just for example purposes. So I'm going to come back to this Payment Refund Center. Again, if that requested delivery date for that order was after this apply date, I would be able to see it, but I wouldn't be able to apply a payment to it. However, I did create it for today, so we are good to go. So I'm going to go to Payment Refund Center again. I selected my batch, came into batch details, come into my Payment Refund Center. I'm going to find that invoice. So here I can actually see my invoice and my credit memo, my open credit balance in here as well. So let's say if I wanted to apply the credit with a payment, I can do that as well. I can click new payment, however much they're paying me. So let's say they're paying me the $40. Whoops, sorry. Cash, $40. Now what I want before I select these is these two options right here selected. Apply CM and open receipts and apply CM and open receipts first. What this does is it's going to take any credit balances that I have selected and it's going to apply them first before applying the payment. So here I'm going to go ahead and click apply to selected. So pretty much the same steps as before. We select our invoices and credits, apply to selected. and it will show you here that we are wiping off the balance for both of these amounts. So it is applying to each other. Now you can do this same step just applying the credit without the payment if you wanted to. So I don't have to apply a credit with a payment if I don't want to. So I'm actually going to cancel this. If I save this, it's going to completely wipe these out because I'm applying the payment and the credit itself. But I'm going to cancel this for this example because I want to show you you can actually apply a credit via the screen. So same steps. Select the customer, new payment, but here I'm not going to put in an amount. I'm going to leave it 0. And what I'm going to do with these options still checked, I'm going to simply select these, apply to selected. So now you see it's going to wipe out that credit and it's applying the $10 to the invoice. So when I click save, it's going to tell me there's at least one outstanding balance. That's perfectly fine. I go ahead and click OK. So now it leaves that invoice with the $40 that I still owe, but it has applied that credit balance to that invoice. So if I click close, it will show me that $0 payment amount. But here I can see in my payment refund details what was paid or what was used. So I can see that this credit was applied to this invoice. So kind of segueing into that area, we do have in this batch details screen a couple of different options other than the reverse button we just talked about. We have payment refund details that allows you to see the information for this payment. So here in this payment, I've selected this payment right here, this 150 that I had applied to the 120. And when I hit payment refund details, down at the bottom, I can see what payment instrument I used, the amount that I used, and the check number, if there was one. And then up here, I will see pretty much the entire activity that makes up that check. So here was the invoice that I applied it to and the amount that I applied. So here I have this $30 open receipt that was created to make up that difference. And then from here, I could even drill down further and see the details for the invoice. So lots of different drill down opportunities in here. I won't bog us down with that just yet, but that is a nice feature that we have for these payments. You can always see what this payment entails. You can also choose the payment refund info button. This is actually going to show you who created this payment, if anybody modified it or reversed it or anything like that. So as far as modifying, oh, and just to show you the reversal, so here I can see I created this and I reversed it. Now, as far as modifying, we're looking at these and it sounds like we can reverse, but we can't modify, and that is absolutely not true. We can go ahead and modify a payment if needed. Now, depending on the situation, if it was the wrong amount or it was the wrong customer, then yes, you will want to reverse it and then just re-enter. However, if it was simply applied to the wrong invoice or it just wasn't distributed correctly, that's something we can easily take care of. If we are in this batch and we go back into the Payment Refund Center screen, I can hit Select Check, and I can look up the check that I want or the payment that I want. So let's say this $97 or maybe this Eddie Packing or this 150. Let's click OK. I can click Edit, and I can change certain information. Again, I can change what was applied or how much was applied. I can change the distribution. So if I needed to change the check amount or how it was distributed, I can change that as well. And again, I don't have an example right here where I've applied a payment to multiple invoices, but if I incorrectly applied it to one invoice and not the other, I can do that as well. I can change that information. So any of that information can be changed. So just pretending that we have two invoices here and I meant to apply it to the other one, I simply zero out this apply amount and then select the invoice I need to apply to and click save again. So as long as there's no difference in the amount or the customer that it was applied to, you're perfectly okay to make changes as needed. Okay. So here, we also have an apply credit screen. So we were talking about applying credits in here. We also have an apply credit screen. Uh, it's not as recommended. It is very simple to use. However, it's not recommended as far as applying credits, and I will tell you why. Applying a credit through the apply credit screen is applying it outside of this batch. So with that, there's no way to reverse it if it was done in error. So if you needed to reverse a credit memo, then that would actually require one of our developers to do that. However, if you applied a credit in here, we have this reverse button. So now we can undo what we did before. And if I go into that payment refund center and pull up that customer, I can see that invoice and that credit memo back to where it needs to be. Okay. Now, let's talk refunds really quickly. That's one of the last things to discuss in here is refunds. So let's say the customer wants a refund. No problem. If they wanted a refund check, then there is a different area which we've already had a training on under payables, sundry checks called customer refund check. So if you're actually cutting a check out of your check stock, that's where you would want to apply the refund. But if they wanted to apply the refund in any other way, let's say cash or wire or anything like that, or maybe a check that's not part of your check stock, who knows, um, then we want to go ahead and apply it here. The way to do so is new refund, and you're going to put in the negative amount that you're giving them. So I'm going to write off this credit memo with a refund. I'm going to distribute as needed, so I'm giving them cash. I'm going to select that credit memo. I'm going to apply to selected, and I'm going to click save. And that's basically it. So if you gave money back to the customer in any way other than your check stock, that is how you would do it with that new refund button. All right. So that is basically it as far as the processing screen. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in here. And there's one last thing I want to talk about as far as the batch is concerned, and that is the sundry payment option. So the sundry payment option allows you to collect a payment from somebody who is not typically your customer and it has nothing to do with your inventory. So let's say you performed a service for somebody and you needed to go ahead and they paid you for that service. So now we need to collect that payment. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to click new. After clicking the sundry payment button, again, it gives me a payment number. Again, I can update that as needed. I'm going to put in the amount that they gave me. They paid me $150 for this service. I'm going to choose payment distribution. They gave me a check. Put in the check number. I'll put the name on the check, Philippe. And then I'm going to specify what was the credit GL account. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and put this against just a random account, just for an example. And then I can put in a description for the check as well. Was this for freight charge, storage charge, something like that? Completely up to you. And then after I'm done, I'll just go ahead and click save and close. So now I can see my sundry check in green listed here as well. Now, of course, you still have the ability to reverse this if you need to. However, I'm going to just leave that be for now. So here is my batch. Here are the payments that I have collected. I had a couple of reversals and I had one sundry payment. So here are all of my amounts that I've entered in. Here's what I've collected in cash, checks, and anything else that I might have had. Of course, I didn't because I would reverse that initial one. So now, at the end of it all, if all of this looks good and correct, then I can go ahead and mark this as deposited. Now, of course, you don't want to do this until you've actually seen this deposit to your bank account. But once it has deposited to your bank account, you can go ahead and deposit whichever batches have cleared at the same time. So if I had multiple batches clear my bank account at the same time, I can go ahead and mark them all as deposited as needed. So to do that, I come back into this Batches tab. I click this Deposit button on the right side, and I go ahead and select in this Depot checkbox which batches I want to clear. So if I'm wanting to clear all three of these, I'm going to put in my bank statement date. So we'll call this, and I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And so now all of those batches have been marked as deposited. And that's basically the last step as far as the payments go. Now, of course, you do have the ability to work backwards. If something was done incorrectly, if we needed to take care of something, we can go ahead and work backwards as needed. Let's say I needed to reverse a payment or I deposited something in error. Very simple. All we need to do is change what we're seeing over here. So this option, these show options, are specifically for this grid. So here, if I want to see all my batches, regardless of the status, I can see all of them. If I just want to see my deposited, I can just see my deposited. And then, of course, what we were set to earlier, undeposited, just to see active batches. So if I want to see a deposited batch, I can choose deposited or all batches. And I can even filter based on the date. So right now, it's looking basically from the beginning of time up to November of this year. So I can go ahead and say, I just want to look for a batch that I know was created for 10/30/2018. And that will filter my list here. Now from here, I can go ahead and undeposit as needed. And to undeposit, it's the same exact process as depositing. All I do is click deposit on the right side, uncheck that box, and put in the same deposit date. Now we recommend the same deposit date because if this was just a quick issue that needs to be fixed and you're going to redeposit right afterwards, we want to make sure there are no date conflicts. So we're going to go ahead and undeposit as of the same date, click Save. And now if I show my deposited batches, I can see that batch back in here, come to batch details, and do what I need to do. If this was a deposited batch, which I'll show you right now, you can see I don't really have any features in here other than return, payment refund details, and payment refund info. And of course, you do not press return. So we don't have to worry about that. But you do still have the ability to select a batch and look at the information, see the payment refund details, see the payment refund info, anything like that. All right. Now, back in this screen, we do have a couple of other features. As you can see, if you wanted to see the batch info for this batch, you can go ahead and hit batch information, and it shows you a lot of the same information: who created it, who's modified it, and who deposited it. Now, as you can see, it kept my name, but it has no deposit date. So when it is redeposited, whichever user does that, it will update here and put in the date. The report is going to show you a report for these batches listed in this grid. So I'm going to click No to preview it. And it's just showing you the batches in the grid. It's pretty much showing you exactly what exists in the grid. So pretty straightforward. It's just showing you your list of batches, number, apply date, control amount, real amount, things like that. And then down here, we actually have some specific batch reports. So here we can see a short payment report. If there was a short payment in a batch, we can see that information. If we wanted to see, like I said, you can have batches separated by payment instrument, or you can distribute as much as you want in a single batch, like I did in this example. So if I come to batch distribution and I preview this, and of course you can export this to Excel as well, this is just going to show me all of the customers and invoices that I have applied payments to, and it's going to show me all of the amounts, uh, sorry, all of the payment amounts that I have in this batch, and it's going to show you what I collected for those. So $150 for my check, $90 for cash, 180.30 for check, 83.30 for check, and then cash, check. So it's showing me all of my information here and giving me my totals at the end. And then we have the distribution recap. And here I'm just going to go ahead and preview that. So we have a summary, and the summary is just showing you essentially the batch, total amount of the payment instruments collected. And then if I hit detail, it's going to look very similar to the batch distribution. It's going to show you the amounts, but it's also going to show you the individual documents, the individual payment amounts. And of course, you can export that to Excel as well. We also have a bank recon button here. This is the same bank reconciliation report that you can access in payable reports as well as receivable reports. So I'm not going to click on it today because we've already looked at it and we will be revisiting it when we talk about AR reports. All right. Now, the one last thing I want to talk about as far as payments goes. We talked about NSF fees and if something was bounced or anything like that. So we used to have the return function, but we do not use it anymore. The reason being is it's a little bit complicated to capture in the back end. So what we actually request you do is leave the original deposited amount as is. So you're going to leave the batch and the original payment completely alone. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have a couple of things set up under code maintenance, primarily sundry items. So these sundry items originally are used for sales for non-inventory charges, but you're going to have two sundry items set up specifically for this bounce check issue. So I have a bounce check Bank of America and bounce check Chase, and then I have an NSF fee. So both of these are linked to the bank account itself, and then this is linked to your non-sufficient funds account. So the way that we would use this is we would create a sundry sales order. So we would come into sales orders, and let's say, let me go back to that batch really quickly, and I'll pick somebody. Let's say this Dole produce, this $97, it bounced. So what I need to do is I need to get that I need to get that amount back on their account. And actually, I'm going to use this 183.30 because this was a pretty straightforward, no special options. So this 183.30 bounce. So I need this back on their account, and I'm getting hit with an NSF fee. So I'm going to roll that to the customer as well. So what I'm going to do is select the customer. So I click New on the right side. And for those of you who haven't seen our sales order training, let us know, send us a chat or an email, and we can send this to you as well. But this is essentially just creating a sales order without items. So I click New, selected my customer, make sure I have my requested delivery date the way that I want it. And ignoring all of these items, because we don't need these here, we can just completely ignore them. On the right side, I'm going to go ahead and hit this sundry item button. And this here lists out all of those sundry items I was talking about. So depending on where this went to my Chase account. So I want to go ahead and select this bounce check Chase. And for this one, I'm going to put in the full amount that they paid me. So they paid me $183.30. And what that's doing is, since this is since this sundry item is pointed to the bank account, it's actually going to credit your bank account and remove that 183.30 from the general ledger. Oop, let's go ahead and enter that in correctly. Sorry, the order quantity is going to be 1, and the unit price without freight is going to be the full amount. Apologies on that. So we want our line price or our unit price without freight to be 183.30, or our extended line price to be 183.30. Then, if you need to roll over that NSF fee, we're going to go ahead and hit that sundry item button again, select that NSF fee, put in 1 for the quantity again, and put whatever they are charging you. So if they are charging me $100, then we're going to go ahead and put in $100. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save. Again, we ignored all of those items that populated. So if any populated, don't worry, just ignore them, and they will go ahead and disappear when you save. And then what we're going to do is ship and bill this, just like we did before when I was doing that other example. And once it is billed, this amount or this invoice is now on their account. So essentially, we created a debit memo. This is exactly how debit memos would be created in the back end. We just did it manually so that we have the ability to see exactly what this debit memo is for. It is for a bounce check, and it is for the NSF fee. So now if I go back into the customer's ledger, and again, we're going to have a different setting for, we're going to have a different set or different training for our customer master file. But if I look up Dole Produce, I can see this $283.30 on their account that they owe me. And of course, I can drill down and see the details for it as well. So that is pretty much what I wanted to discuss today as far as the Payment Refund Center and any bounce check issues that you might have, as well as depositing. If you have any questions, let me know. Of course, we're not taking questions in these trainings, but if you have any questions whatsoever, send those over to me in an email or send those over to support in an email, and we will absolutely be happy to help you out with those. Or if you have any issues and you want a little bit more one-on-one training, let us know, and we'll be happy to take care of that as well. Thank you guys for coming today. Thank you. I hope you learned something. And I hope you join me for another training pretty soon. Of course, we're having these weekly trainings, and we will be sending these videos out at the end of the week. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys, and have a great day.